Scarpaleggia, the Liberal candidate for Lake St. Louis. And Cameron Stiff, the Green Party. Please note that the West Island blog is live streaming this event on Facebook. Rhonda will handle the questions in English et les questions en français sera Monsieur Coury. Also a big thank you to Nancy Essenian for acting as our timer. Nancy is in the back over here, and the candidate should take note. She will lift signs up when your time is running out. Since we have so many visitors with us this evening, I would just like to mention our club's policy on decorum. We believe in treating all our guest speakers with the respect they deserve, even if their views differ greatly from our own. We are here to listen to all points of view. I should also note that in the event there are outbursts or negative comments, the candidate who is speaking will be afforded extra time. 4 years ago, we organized a similar event, and it was an informative and convivial evening. We hope for the same tonight. Anyone blatantly disregarding this policy will be asked to leave. The evening will start with presentations by each candidate. They were sent the rules governing the evening well in advance. Question period will begin once all candidates have spoken. It will last a maximum of 60 minutes. Questions will be taken as follows. The first question will be one from the MLUWC advocacy group. The first question will be one from the MLUWC advocacy group. The second question will be asked by Rhonda Massad from amongst questions received by her blog followers. And after this, questions submitted in advance by our members will alternate with questions from her blog readers. Questions in French will be handled by Daniel. In the event there is still time left, questions from the floor will be permitted to one per individual to ensure as wide a participation. If everyone who wishes to ask a question has the opportunity to do so and there is still time left, we will also allow you to ask a second question. The audience is reminded to always be polite. The goal is not to embarrass the candidates, but rather to raise specific issues of concern, especially those of concern to women, and to get them on the political agenda. Any questions deemed inappropriate, offensive, or derogatory, or that would seem to attack the integrity of any candidate will be ruled out of order. The first order of business is to identify the order in which the candidates will speak. I now ask Linda Sestock, our president, to come forward, and we'll pull the names out of the envelope, which I left over here.
Welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, you can, this one is number one.
Yep.
Okay, first one is Mariam Ishak.
But we're gonna, if I could ask you to so that we have them in order, or should we sit in order or no?
Okay, I thought you were gonna listen, take a note of who
Okay,
it was.
yes.
Why don't you just, Daniel can handle that.
Yeah.
He assured me he can handle that.
Yes, he's very good with the Excel spreadsheet.
Francis Scarpaleggia.
That name's longer.
I'm just gonna be Francis.
Okay.
Cameron Stiff. Gary Charles.
Logically,
Anybody? Dana. There we go. Okay. So I'll now hand the microphone over to you. You can call up the candidates.
well, I'm gonna just stay there for a second. My candidates are here.
All right, we're going to offer 6 minutes each candidate for them to tell a little bit about themselves, and then we will continue with the question period. So Miriam Ishak, Conservative Party of Canada, you're up first.
thank you so much for having me here. I'm not as tall as Mrs. Cole, so I'm just going to bring it down a bit. So thank you so much for this beautiful invitation. I feel home as I attended many of the MUWC meetings, so I feel that this is my home and family. I want to tell you a bit about my background and why am I doing this. So at age 24, I moved to Canada. I moved with a strong heart, full of hope for my new life. And arriving into this great country, I embraced the Canadian culture and I integrated very well in the society. And believe me, Canada gave me just as much as I gave her. As a very young girl, the value of service was instilled in me by my parents until it became part of me. So I started my community service back in Egypt as a scout girl. And you all know, once a scout girl, always a scout girl. So when I came here, I started serving my community and looking for other stuff, other services that I can do. So I came to Canada and I became a member of the board of directors of the West Island Women's Chapter, a member of the Egyptian Canadian Business Network, and I had the honor to represent the Women of Canada with the National Council of Women of Canada at the United Nations at the CSW 62. And I had an honor also to go serve abroad, where I went on a humanitarian trip to Bolivia with my family, my husband and my 2 kids. So as a member of Pierre Fond-Dollard community for over 20 years, I have taken the term public servant to heart, offering my time and commitment to bettering our great community and country. So I guess you can call me a true Canadian dream, where an immigrant comes to the country, integrate, embrace the culture, and now wants to serve her country on a higher level, and what's better than government. So now I'm taking my service to my country to the second level, or a higher level. I was nominated as the Conservative Party candidate a year ago, September 14, 2018. And since then, we did hit the ground running. So in January, we started a campaign, we called it Listening to Pierre Fond-Dollard. And during this campaign, we knocked on over 9,000 doors. And our question was, what would you like us to talk about? What are your concerns? What's important for you? And that helped me build my platform and focus my platform on 3 important facets. First, giving a voice to our seniors. Second, ensuring that our sandwich generation is supported. And the third is the not-for-profit organization. And I can thank the MLUWC for helping me shed light on the not-for-profit organization, because attending the meeting, I had the chance to meet with several organizations here that I didn't honestly know about. And through my Facebook and social media, we did that. So for me, shedding light on these organizations, helping them, giving them a voice, I feel that they are not supported enough through our governments and in the community. Succeeding in doing this, for me, this is already a winning campaign. So, 14 days left to election day, and I'm asking you all to go and vote. Voting is very important this year for our community and our riding. I'm going to talk about my riding in Pierre Fond-Dollard. It's very, very important. So I need your help to help me protect our Canadian values and protect our communities and the future of our children. Thank you.
Our next candidate is from the Liberal Party of Canada, Francis Carpeleja.
Thank you, Rhonda. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I thank the club for organizing this forum. I know you organized one in 2015. I was at that one as well. One thing I've always found about the club is that it has a very high standard of professionalism, and you can see it tonight the way things are so well organized. And I think maybe your charter on decorum, maybe we should adopt that in the House of Commons. But, all kidding aside, I'll give you a bit of my background as well. I studied economics and business, and then I went to work in the private sector for a few years. I worked in the computer industry, not on the technical side, but on the management side, and then worked in the pharmaceutical industry on the financial side. And after that, I went into education, which I found to be an extremely enriching profession. I taught at Dawson College for 3 years, and all through that time, I was actively involved in politics as a volunteer organizer. First as a young liberal with the Quebec Liberal Party, and then in the Liberal Party of Canada. In 1993, I went to Ottawa to work as the political attaché to my predecessor, Clifford Lincoln, whom many of you know, a great mentor, the perfect individual to learn about not only policy but politics from. And when I say that, I mean, yes, when you work, when you work in a member of Parliament's office, you learn about issues and so on. But when you work for somebody like that, you learn essentially how to carry yourself in difficult situations in the political arena. After when Mr. Lincoln, when Clifford retired, I ran for the nomination, and I was lucky enough to win. My relationship with the Montreal Lakeshore University Women's Club goes back a good 15, 16 years. I think the first person I met was Elizabeth Semmelhack, and at the time, the club got, because it's a very engaged club, it gets engaged politically on issues, and it got involved in the decision to redraw the boundaries of Lac St. Louis riding, and there was a delegation that appeared before the Commission on electoral boundaries at the time. The reason one of the reasons I'm in politics is, well, first of all, I think all of us, whatever it is we do in our daily lives, in our careers, I think that fundamentally we also want to feel that we're contributing to the community and to the country. Whether we're a teacher, whether we're a business person, a social worker, a scientist, a doctor, nurse, we have the immediate task at hand, but we also feel that we're helping to build a greater country. And my particular field of interest was policy. I studied the social sciences, and so I saw how policies can be fashioned that have an impact on society, and I thought, well, that's extremely interesting, and I'd like to pursue that. So that's really how I developed my interest in politics and got involved. I also find the democratic process extremely fascinating. I find it almost magical in the sense that the interests and desires of thousands and millions of people somehow in a very mysterious way get translated into the decisions of government. And how does that happen? Well, members of parliament, politicians, they're in the community, we talk to people, you just get a sense of your community and where they might stand on something. So I find that to be an extraordinary process, and I hold democracy as such a dear thing. And I also think it's very important for political leaders, and we do a lot of this in our office, to explain government policies to their constituents, because sometimes one will see a headline and won't necessarily understand all that's behind it. So people write to us and say, well, we don't agree with this policy or this decision, and we take the time to research and to write back and say, well, these are the reasons why this particular decision was taken, or this particular policy is the way it is. So this two-way communication is really the crux of democracy, and it's something very very important and very special. I guess we'll have an opportunity to talk about issues when the questions are asked. Essentially, in a nutshell, the Liberal platform in 2019 is building on the Liberal platform in 2015, which was based on the notion that we should be investing in Canadians and in Canada, and that is really the road to success and prosperity and social justice for all Canadians. And we also are building on the notion that we have to act on environmental issues, and we will continue to do so if re-elected, and probably actually in a more ambitious way even. So I look forward to your questions.
Kevin Stitt from the Green Party of Canada.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me and us here tonight. So, in 1991, I don't know if you're familiar or aware that in 1991 there was a World Scientist Warning to Humanity. Has anyone heard of this? It was signed by about 1,800 scientists, and they said in the introduction that human beings and the natural world are on a collision course. I know this is intense, but that's what we're here to talk about, the big issues, right? They said human activities inflict harsh and often irreversible damage on the environment and on critical resources. If not checked, many of our current practices put at serious risk the future we wish for human society and the plant and animal kingdoms, and may so alter the living world that it will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know. Fundamental changes are urgent if we are to avoid the collision our present course will bring about. And that was nearly 30 years ago. So there's no debate that the world is going green. In all the conversations that I've participated in, the discussions, the door-to-door, the meet and greets, the debates, everyone's talking about how green can we be. Because we know we have to go in that direction. Climate change is no longer, it's mostly settled. Most of us understand that it's human caused. It's caused by burning fossil fuels and changing our land, deforesting, our agricultural practices and whatnot, or putting emissions into the atmosphere and breaking down the Earth's ability to reabsorb those carbon emissions. So we're aware of that now. We're aware that the oceans are full of plastic. We're aware that we have thousands of chemicals in our water systems. We're aware that we are basically on an unsustainable path. I think that's generally accepted right now, and that's part of why there's been an increase in interest in the Green Party, and green governments have been elected around the world, and representatives, especially in Europe. I think people are driven both by their desire for a better world. We all want a better world for ourselves and for our families and children, but we also are increasingly worried about the world that we're creating. And actually, so 2 years ago, a second warning was issued, a second World Scientist Warning to Humanity, and it was signed by over 15,000 scientists this time. And they're basically saying, we haven't made the changes that we need to make. And things are getting very dire, very dire. And we can see that, right? The Bahamas, the hurricane that hit the Bahamas displaced tens of thousands of people. At one point, 70,000 people were waiting for emergency aid. So we know that the consequences are getting more severe, and that it's more and more urgent to take action. So I'm 37, and I'm part of the environmental generation. So I grew up with awareness that there were ecological issues in the world. We got used to hearing stories about the hole in the ozone layer, acid rain, loss of forests, species extinction, nuclear threats, desertification, poverty, and of course climate change. As a young man, I found it shocking that more was not being done to combat these issues. Indeed, I have dedicated my career to trying to make a difference. I studied sociology at university, and I learned about the history of Western civilization and sort of the underlying factors that have brought us to this current state. And I went on to work, I did everything I could for the last 16 years to try to make a difference. I created the Canadian Youth Delegation to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 2006, which was an initiative to get young people involved in the process at the United Nations. We took a delegation of 21 young Canadians to Nairobi to a conference there, which was a huge surprise to the Conservative government that had just taken power at the time. I wasn't expecting to see many familiar faces, but we were there to hold them accountable I've done community work. I've turned parking lots into gardens, greened alleyways, set up farmers markets. I've started organizations and sat on boards of directors. For the last 7 years, I've run a composting company in Montreal. It's called Compost Montreal. It's not hard to find on the internet. We're the largest composting company in the city. We take care of the waste from institutions like McGill, as well as dozens of restaurants, daycares, offices, you name it, we will compost it. So, in my opinion, it is time for us to commit to a new set of objectives for society. We are at a turning point, and that's what has been said 30 years ago, is that we were at a turning point, and really, we're at a turning point now. What I think we need to do is drastically decarbonize our society, and that's central to the Green Party platform. We need to avoid the worst of climate change right now, which is more than 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. We need to cut our emissions by 60% in the next 12 years, which means that 1 out of every 2 cars driving down that street needs to either not be there or needs to be fully electric. It's a pretty massive shift. But beyond that, I think we need to address all the other issues as well. And the Green Party platform provides a number of ways to do that. We are not just a one-trick pony. We have a diverse platform with a number of points. We're talking about renewing the social contract. We're talking about making lives better for seniors, for families. We're talking about real reconciliation, and I know a number of Indigenous peoples, and they said they don't want more money. They want us to change our destructive ways, to live more in harmony with the natural world and with each other. So that's what I believe in, and why I've put myself forward for government, and I look forward to hearing your questions and trying to answer as best I can.
Charles, People's Party of Canada.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the MLUWC for inviting me to this event. My name is Gary Charles. I'm the People's Party candidate for Lac St. Louis. I was born, raised, and educated in Montreal. I'm a third-generation Canadian of Lebanese descent. Married for over 26 years, I'm the father of 3 children, and I've been living in the West Island for well over 40 years. My children are the reason why I'm running in this election. I want to ensure that they have a healthy and prosperous future. I chose to run under the People's Party banner because the People's Party is actually the only fiscally conservative party running in this election. I honestly don't think that there's anything more important than having an economically responsible government. The People's Party is committed to eliminating the deficit within 2 years of our mandate. The other parties have no credible plan to balance the budget. And even more worrisome, no party leader is uttering a word about Canada's debt. The Liberals recently announced that they will run deficits throughout their next mandate. In fact, they do not anticipate eliminating the deficit before 2040. 2040, our debt will be over $1.6 trillion, or $40,000 for every man, woman, and child. They try to reassure us with phrases like, the deficit financing is not a problem. Our debt to equity ratio is holding steady. Now that's like saying, the value of my home went up 30%. So honey, let's add $100,000 to the mortgage and go on a shopping spree. The other party leaders are making all sorts of promises. Spend, spend, spend. Now this is nothing more than buying your votes. No one has the guts to tell you that the only way to keep these spending promises is to have our children pay for it sometime during their lifetime. So ask yourselves, is the short-term gain of these spending promises worth the long-term pain that our children will endure? History has taught us that there will be pain, perhaps a 65% tax rate, or massive program spending cuts. The People's Party will not mortgage our children's future, nor leave them with such a heavy economic burden. I want to point out some of the highlights of our platform. The People's Party promises to abolish supply management. This government-sponsored cartel is being kept in place at the expense of of you. Eliminating supply management will help save Canadian households hundreds of dollars in grocery bills every year. The People's Party is the only party that seems to understand that healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction. The federal government just can't go and build hospitals and promise MRI machines. But to address the lack of funding in healthcare, the People's Party promises to transfer all GST revenues, roughly $40 billion, directly to the provinces with no strings attached. The provinces will then have the necessary funds to address their most critical healthcare needs. The People's Party is a pro-immigration party. We just need to listen to our Canadian economists, our business leaders, to determine the optimal immigration rate based on the economic needs of Canada. Now, at the current levels of immigration, Canada will have admitted the equivalent of the entire population of Nova Scotia within 3 years. The People's Party simply wants to have a made in Canada, made for Canadians immigration policy without the approval of the United Nations. The People's Party does not deny climate change. Canadians are actually making strides towards a greener economy. Canada's percentage of global emissions, now at 1.6%, has been decreasing the past decade. There is no need to panic, and certainly no need to shame us into taking drastic action that will inflict economic harm to all Canadians. Zero net carbon is a laudable objective, and I sincerely hope we get there. But please realize, we need to get India and China on board to make a significant difference. The People's Party will focus on reducing your cost of living and implement policies that will leave you with more disposable income. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're in that ballot box, you must ask yourself, will I vote for a party whose policies will inevitably do economic harm to my children? Or do I vote for Gary Charles, whose party promises to get Canada's fiscal house in order? Our children deserve to have a healthy and prosperous future, and I would be honored to represent you as your Member of Parliament for Lac Saint Louis.
NDP.
Good evening. Can you hear me? So, good evening, moderators, and Montreal Lakeshore University Women's Club members and visitors, fellow candidates. I'm Dana Chevalier. I'm the NDP candidate for Lac Saint Louis. I also want to say thank you to the members of this organization for the work that you do for promoting education and the status of women. I am, as the daughter of a teenage single mother and the first person in my family to have gone to university, I sincerely recognize and honor the importance that education plays in providing opportunity to women and to our communities. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for having us here tonight. You know, throughout my college and university studies, I worked, but I also received loans and special bursaries, and if I hadn't, I wouldn't be a lawyer today. It was really necessary. So bringing me to the NDP platform, which I was asked to present, this kind of explains also my attachment to the NDP party, that it's always been the party of social equality and everyday, helping out everyday people, and that our investments need to benefit everyone. So on the topic of supporting the advancement of gender equity, this is an issue that's really important to the NDP, and I'm proud to say that our party is the first party to have nominated a woman to be their leader, a first major party, and that was back in 1989, Audrey McLaughlin. And also now I'm also proud to say that 2015 we had parity in our candidates, and we do today. Today in Quebec, our party has 50% candidates that are women, 50% men, and 49% across Canada. So we walk the talk, and that's the party that I'm drawn to. Other things with regards to, gender equity as a term, we say it's still too common for women to experience discrimination and gender-based violence. And we believe that leadership at all levels should be involved in improving that. And the federal government can play a role in that too. So, I hear that women still currently make 32% less than men, and that gap is even larger for women from racialized groups. So an NDP government would require employers to be transparent about pay and legislate, implement different equity legislation. And for violence, gender-based violence, we want to have a national action to combat gender-based violence. I've worked in women's shelters, emergency women's shelters for children and women fleeing conjugal violence in Ontario and in Quebec, and I tell you, these resources are so important, and an NDP government would work to find ways for them to have permanent funding. Women's right to choose, obviously the NDP is there. We support that, but we also believe that there should be safe and accessible abortion and reproductive health care service across the country. But also further on the woman's right to choose, I'm going to add that includes programs that support mothers, because the right to choose also includes being able to trust that you can do it the best you can, and it takes a community to help you feel supported to do that. And in Quebec, we have phenomenal program with regards to childcare and parental insurance. These programs don't exist in the rest of Canada. So an NDP government, in their promises, is prioritizing that, and that will help all Canadians. And to bring it back to Quebec, well, we would benefit because any federal funds that go to other provinces would come to us, even though we already have our own program, and that would allow us to contribute to work on other education and health issues that are of our jurisdiction. So another thing that I want to mention about why I choose the NDP is we also see climate action as necessary, and I agree that we need to double the efforts that we've made so far in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm confident that an NDP government would put that in action. So thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Donna. Once again, candidates, welcome to our event. We are very pleased to have you with us. Tonight we'll be touching on 8 themes, Rhonda. So we're going to talk about ministerial portfolios, the economy, public transit, the abortion subject, environment, immigration, local concerns, and finally, affordable housing. Every one of these themes are important to the West Island, to the folks from the West Island, and we want to hear what every candidate has to say about it. The way we're going to function, we will be speaking. Every question is going to have one primary candidate that's going to be leading the question and answering on their opinion. Following that candidate, we will allow a second or a third reply from other party candidates. We want to ensure that every candidate has an equal amount of time, so the selection process was made in fair process, and we'll be starting with an easy question. So we're going to invite Dana to go back to the podium. Dana, this is a really easy question. This question has a total of 3 candidates that can answer. So Dana's going to start, and we're going to choose the 2 other ones once Dana finishes answering. Dana, so if elected, what ministerial mandate would best suit your experience and your goals? And tell us why.
Well, I would like to say it would be the climate. I mean, there's not a climate ministry currently, but there should be. It would be, that's something that moves me. It's something that as I'm a mother and I want immediate action on that, and I'm a pretty courageous person. I don't think I'd be afraid to do things that some people won't like. So, how much time do I have?
We've got a total of 2 minutes. Our timekeeper in the back will.
1 minute and 25 still left.
Wow, that's not an easy question. So, which could you repeat?
So what ministerial mandate would best suit your experience and your goals? And tell us why. So if I were to reword the question, say you became a minister, what ministry would you take? Which portfolio would you want to support? If not becoming a minister, which one would you want to push?
Yeah, I would want to push the envelope on climate action for sure. So what in my experience helps me to do that? I mean, I've been working as a lawyer and as a city councillor. I'm a 2-term city councillor in Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, and I've been working with my colleagues to, for example, we needed to preserve some of the last green space on the island in Montreal, and we worked together with experts to lay out a mechanism that would indicate that it's the citizens and our local government that decides what's in the best interest of our whole community. And despite the fact that developers sued us and did a whole slander, suggesting that everybody's tax dollars would go up. And anyway, we succeeded. We with the cooperation with the island, with the city of Montreal, we now have another 15 hectares included in the Salon Park.
Thank you, Dana. So, Dana, we'd like to open up the questions to the candidates. Who would like to go next? Go ahead. Cameron, you can go ahead. And then we'll go. Absolutely.
We have a little mic confusion going on. You know what we're going to do? We're going to give you guys the mic. Danielle and I are going to move to that mic. I think that's going to make it a little easier.
Oh, sorry, just I'm not. I need to move to that one.
I've worked in a lot of different projects and scales.
Wait, we can actually bring the lectern over, I think.
Oh, let's not move everything. We'll just go over here. That's it. Go for it.
So it's a great question. It's something I thought a little bit about. I considered agriculture because I worked a lot in organic waste management, and I believe we need to massively uptake our composting programs and get that compost into fields to restore the damage that's been done by conventional agriculture over the past number of decades. But I think economic development, finance and economic development, I think that one of the biggest things that we need to do right now is implement a new economic framework, because the ones that we're using right now are too simplistic. You know, when we add hospitals because people are more sick, we're measuring that as a good in society. We're saying, oh, there's economic growth, we've added jobs, therefore things are doing well, we're doing better. As long as we see economic growth, we all feel a sort of sense of relief, I think. I don't know if you feel that, but that's generally, I think the perception in society is that our well-being is tied to economic growth, and I don't think that's true. You have more prisons because you have more criminals, that's economic growth. That's not good, we know that, but we need a new economic framework. We need to start measuring more broadly
are people happier or are they more depressed? Do we have more greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere or less? So with the new economic framework in place, we can then develop a new economy. And I'm an entrepreneur. I come from an entrepreneurial family, and I've worked a lot with university students over the years. And there's a hunger, there's a desire for people to join a new economy, to be part of a green economy, and to develop new businesses and new services and goods that will take us in the right direction. So that would be a fun portfolio, I think.
Thank you, Cameron. We're going to pass the mic on to Mariam.
So, based on my involvement with the community and what I see around me, I think the best portfolio that can suit me is social development and family affairs. I believe that the family is the core of our society, and there is a lot of stuff that our families need, a lot of support that we need. As I mentioned, our not-for-profit organizations are doing an amazing job in our society, serving in several niches where the government is not really there or present. And unfortunately, many of these organizations are closing because of lack of funding or lack of volunteers. And based on the many I met, many of them are not receiving any funding from the government. So if I want to build my society, I prefer to be in social development and family affairs.
All right, we're moving on to the economic question for the evening. All right, it is expected that the Canadian debt will be $1.3 trillion by the year 2040 if we continue our current spending trends. Today we pay $54 million in daily interest obligations, $19 billion per year, which is equivalent to our entire military budget. How do you expect to pay off this debt that will inevitably be left for the upcoming generations? We are starting with Gary Charles.
It is a problem. It's something that, as I was mentioning, no party is mentioning how, first of all, before we even touch the debt, we have to tackle the deficit. We're $20 billion in the hole every year. And if a Liberal government gets elected, they plan to go 4 consecutive years of another $20 billion. There's interest that is being paid on that. Interest that we're paying to, instead of paying out, this could be returned to taxpayers if we handle our finances the right way. My hero in the 1990s was Paul Martin, despite the fact that he was a Liberal, but he had a very famous phrase, come hell or high water, we're going to...
We said we had issues. We're truly having issues. Would you mind? I'm sorry.
So, come hell or high water, the deficit will be tackled. And within 2 years, he was actually able to eliminate $40 billion in today's dollar. And it was a remarkable achievement. So it's something that I think that whoever is elected as leader has got to take that attitude. Because once our finances spiral out of control, and they're on their way, we're going to eventually be faced with an austerity budget, and we don't want the IMF or the World Bank imposing conditions for us to go on as a country. So it is the most important function of the government is to be fiscally responsible.
Thank you. Our next Francis to answer this question. Apparently not. I'm so sorry. I apologize. We are doing our best.
Well, indeed, it's important to always, for governments to be fiscally responsible. But I don't agree with the doomsday scenario. Our deficit was not 20 billion for the year just ended. It was 13. And if there's not been a recession in Alberta, it would be a balanced budget. So, I think we have to put it in perspective. Our debt to GDP, you always have to look at it in comparative terms, how we're doing with respect to the size of the economy and how we're doing with respect to other countries. And we have the lowest federal deficit and the whole G7. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the whole G7. It doesn't mean that we can't, we should not be careful, and governments are. We have a Treasury Board that keeps track on how money is spent to make sure it's properly spent. Treasury Board is one of those departments that nobody ever talks about. It's pretty dry, but it's very important. And when we ran when we ran in 2015, we ran on the promise of a deficit, because and people said, you're crazy. You're crazy, that's political suicide. But Canadians recognized that if we wanted to move forward, we had to invest in them, and we had to invest in the economy, including our infrastructure. As a side, not a side benefit, but as an important benefit, the Canada Child Benefit was a revolutionary piece of social policy that took 300,000 children out of poverty. That's important too. I think we have to think of that. 800,000 Canadians have been taken out of poverty since 2015. That strengthens families. That makes for a productive economy in the long term.
Okay. Borrowing is important sometimes to grow, and we need that. We need to grow. We need to grow our economy. We need to grow our country, and we need to service our community. It's important to borrow, but I need to have a plan of repayment. I can't keep on borrowing. I need to have a plan to repay the debt. See, I work for a financial institution, and I know for a fact that when a company would come to borrow, we will ask this question. It's okay to borrow because you want to grow, you want to improve the company, you want to make more business, you want to bring more revenue, which is great. I need to know what's your plan of repayment. How much are you going to bring in? When are you going to pay this debt? These are important questions to ask. So borrowing is not the bad thing. Not having a plan of repayment, that's the sad part.
All right, we're moving on to the third topic, public transit. Public transit has always been an important concern on the West Island. What policies would your party put in place to encourage the use of public transit, and how would they impact the West Island community? We would like Cameron to step up for this one.
Thank you. So yeah, public transit in Quebec, 60% of our emissions come from transportation because most of our energy comes from hydro, which is very low emissions. So we do think that improving use of public transit is important in terms of cutting our emissions, but also in terms of improving our cities and improving our lives. I don't know who here loves to sit in a traffic jam. Anyone? No, me neither, right? And it boggles my mind. I take the train. I live in the city, but I'm running in Hudson and in Vaudreuil, and I spend a lot of time in Hudson, so I take the train and the bus, and I biked once as well. And when you see, people day in, day out, sitting in their cars in traffic, it makes you scratch. But then, we realize the cost is too high. It's inefficient. There's not enough stops. There's not enough service. So the Green Party, it's a central plank of our platform in addressing climate change to get a greater network on the roads. The REM is being built, and that's a great step forward in the right direction. But we can do a lot right now with just buses. And there's this bit of a social aversion to using buses in our society. I think we like to be in our cars. Our cars represent safety and security and familiarity and comfort and all that. But in Dunkirk, in northern France, they made the bus system free starting in last January, and they saw a 50% increase in ridership. And I don't know if anyone took the metro during the climate strike on the 27th, and it was free, and it was packed. People were there. This is part of the larger economic framework too. We have to measure the costs of using single-use vehicles up and down the streets every day versus more public transit, and integrate that into our calculus when we're deciding how to allocate for things like public transit. But yeah, it's central to our party.
It is kind of seconding it in the sense that for the NDP, part of our transitioning our economy includes investing in public transit across Canada and all of our communities, and the idea is that a massive investment in public transportation also does create jobs in communities, and we think definitely here in the West Island, it's great to have the REM coming in, but if there's not money to improve the buses system within the West Island, then our needs aren't met and people aren't going to use it. And we need to make public transit efficient and quality and accessible, and NDP government wants to work with all municipalities municipalities who want to make the services free, and we're prepared to work with municipalities for that. Always in the perspective of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but I see it as improving also our quality of life in the West Island. I know people who, their kids go to school at St. George and St. Anne, and they need to drive them to on the other side of Pierrefonds in order to get there, because even though it's only a 10-minute drive, it would take them an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there by bus, but it makes no sense. So the moment municipalities are ready to improve that for their citizens, the federal government under the NDP government would transfer money and prioritize programs that would also get the municipal fleets to become zero emissions as well.
Sorry, it was a two-candidate question.
We're getting our beat, guys. We're getting our beat. You're up. Just not up.
Alors, la question va être en français. Nous allons commencer par remercier Suzanne Chaussé qui a amené cette question. Donc, there's certain questions with two, and some have three.
Sorry.
This is a three-candidate question. Donc, en français. Récemment, nous avons assisté à une nouvelle préoccupation concernant le droit à l'avortement dans les nouvelles. Quelle est votre position? Donc, on va commencer par Francis, et après ça, on va pouvoir ouvrir à deux autres candidats. Francis? Francis, come on down.
Come on down.
The price is right.
The tape didn't work.
Okay, we're going to forgive that microphone. We're going to forgive in general, and we will get this done. We are the community that gets it done.
Yes. C'est très simple. Le Parti libéral croit au libre choix. Le Premier ministre s'est prononcé à maintes reprises sur le sujet. Alors, c'est pas débattable au sein de notre parti, et donc on respecte les droits des femmes, le droit des femmes de choisir. C'est point à la ligne.
Alors, on va ouvrir le sujet à deux candidats. Qui aimerait parler par rapport à ça? Maria, oui, pas.
We're the microphone challenge debate. We're virtually challenged.
Qu'est-ce que je veux dire, c'est le sujet était fermé déjà. Alors, pourquoi on l'ouvre de nouveau? J'ai une vidéo sur ma page Facebook où j'ai très bien dit que le corps d'une femme, c'est le corps d'une femme. On doit arrêter de l'utiliser pour gagner des points politiques. Alors, si nous, les femmes, on a gagné le droit à faire quelque chose, on ne va pas jamais redonner ce droit et reculer en arrière.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, on a place encore un candidat. Cameron.
Ouais, c'est une question qui a été levée avec Mme May. Elle a été accusée d'être contre le choix des femmes, mais elle a clarifié la position qu'elle est 100% pour le choix des femmes. Puis, moi, je pense que dans le parti, mais j'ai dû exposer quelqu'un de mon circonscription qui était contre le choix parce que je dis que c'est fondamental pour nos valeurs. Puis, je pense que l'enjeu plus large aussi, c'est qu'il faut avoir une société où tout le monde a des besoins, a des services, a des services nécessaires, la qualité de vie nécessaire pour avoir des enfants, puis l'élever en santé et sécurité. Donc, je pense qu'il faut regarder plus largement. Puis aussi, tu sais, j'aimerais croire que le Parti conservateur n'ouvre pas le débat, mais on a déjà des preuves de son leader que c'est peut-être, ce serait mettre sur la table. Donc il faut regarder les preuves, les choses qui ont été dites dans le passé.
Merci beaucoup. Nous allons continuer avec le sujet sur l'environnement qui a été annoncé par Paulette Cargill. Donc, merci Paulette pour la question. Plus de 500 000 personnes ont participé à la manifestation contre le changement climatique le mois dernier à Montréal. Il est clair que c'est une priorité absolue pour nos citoyens. Quel est votre plan pour lutter contre le changement climatique, en particulier dans l'ouest de l'île? Cette question est une question à 3 candidats et elle va commencer avec Marianne.
L'environnement est un sujet très très important pour tous les partis, pas seulement pour une seule partie. Et je vois que nous, comme société, on est en train d'évoluer. Parce que dans le passé, si je regarde à mes grands-parents, par exemple, il n'y avait pas de recyclage dans ce temps-là. Mais maintenant, tout le monde est en train de recycler. Notre parti va investir beaucoup d'argent dans tout ce qui est énergie et technologie verte. Alors, c'est quoi la technologie verte? C'est la technologie qui a apporté les voitures électriques. C'est la technologie qui a nous permis maintenant d'avoir les panneaux solaires. C'est toutes les technologies qui sont en train de transférer tout ce qui est mauvais pour l'environnement à quelque chose qui est plus clean, plus naturel pour l'environnement. Et c'est là où on va mettre notre argent parce qu'on croit vraiment que la technologie verte, c'est le futur de notre vie, c'est le futur de nos enfants aussi. Merci.
Merci, Mme Francis. Et je te rappelle que c'est une question à trois candidats, donc vous allez pouvoir continuer.
Alors, notre plateforme, en 2015, nous nous sommes engagés à mettre un prix sur le carbone, un prix sur la pollution, sur les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. À l'époque, on disait, ben ça c'est dangereux, on ne votera jamais pour ça. Mais on a gagné l'élection et on a mis en branle un prix sur le carbone. Ça ne s'applique pas au Québec parce que ça s'applique seulement aux provinces qui n'en ont pas déjà. Un prix sur le carbone, le Québec, ça fait longtemps qu'il a un prix sur le carbone, comme également la Colombie-Britannique. Nous engageons à atteindre une économie à zéro émission nette en 2050 par des mesures telles les investissements dans le transport en commun, etc. Nous allons aussi, parce que pour une économie à zéro émission nette, ça prend des mesures pour absorber le carbone qui est dans l'atmosphère. Alors nous allons planter 2 milliards d'arbres sur une période de 10 ans. Mais dans l'ouest de l'île, je sais qu'il y a des compagnies qui ont eu de l'aide fédérale pour travailler là un réseau de bornes de chargement, parce que si on a des voitures électriques, on veut qu'on puisse ravitailler ou charger nos véhicules, sinon on ne se rendra pas loin. Alors, on investit dans l'ouest de l'île, on a déjà, avec des fonds fédéraux, installé 2 ou 3 bornes de stations de chargement.
I want just to point out that we are calculating who speaks how many times, so we are balancing it out. Mr. Excel's spreadsheet has that covered. Gary, you're up, consequently.
Alors, notre politique concernant le changement climatique, on veut laisser le choix de taxe de carbone aux provinces. Maintenant, ça c'est le cas au Québec. Et on pense que si le fédéral s'implique encore avec d'autres sortes de taxes, il faut regarder, ça va coûter de l'argent. Il y a beaucoup de familles maintenant, ils habitent paycheck to paycheck. C'est pas facile. On peut dire que oui, on veut de taxes carbone, on va, mais la plupart du monde ne sont pas prêts à payer. Ils ne sont pas prêts à payer plus pour tout ce que le carbone touche, comme le transport de nourriture, les transports par avion. Alors, c'est simplement ça. Il faut regarder qu'est-ce que nous pouvons dépenser d'extra. Et à ce moment-là, il n'y a pas grand-chose qui reste après avoir le paye. Je pense que peut-être ce serait à l'individuel de prendre ses décisions. L'individuel, OK, ma prochaine voiture, ce sera une voiture électrique, ce sera une hybride. Ça devrait être une responsabilité individuelle et pas forcer le gouvernement. Merci.
Right, we're moving on to the next topic, which is immigration. We polled the MLUWC. I have a hard time with that. MLUWC polled their audience, and we polled the West Island blog readers. We came up with this beautiful question about homelessness on the West Island. So homelessness is on the rise on the West Island. According to Action Jeunesse de l'Ouest de l'Île, we have more than 200 youth between the ages of 18 to 35 without shelter at any time on the West Island. Local, I know that's shocking, so reabsorb that one. Local West Island food banks are seeing a rise in demand with an influx of immigration. How will your past experience and skill set help move our community forward in providing better quality of life for all? It's Dana's question. This is from the Advocacy Committee of the MLUWC.
So I just want to address the issue too. We know that our housing market is heating up. We know that we have an aging population, and we know that there's hidden poverty in the West Island. There's this reputation, we have this reputation that everybody is rich in the West Island, but people who are on the ground know that that's a myth. And so the question, I guess, is what can I do about it?
Yep. They don't want to know what I'm doing.
Well, I think it's advocating at every level of government that we need to address those concerns. So with the federal government, if I were elected as an NDP, already I can assure you that that's on the radar of the NDP. Housing is, there's also another crisis, and that's the housing crisis, and we're promising to build 300,000 new affordable units across the country. So I would be working to promote all of those, working to push in that direction, whether we make government or not. My ideals that I will push will be the ones of my party, and that would be to help address those problems in our communities.
We need to recognize that social welfare is a provincial jurisdiction. So asking the federal government to intervene and step on the toes of the provinces is a non-starter. As long as we respect these rules, as pointed out in the Constitution, we're going to be fine. But what can we do as a federal government is put more money in your pocket, more disposable income, and then with that disposable income, we will see a reduction in poverty. We will see a willingness to donate to charitable donations. When you have extra money in your pocket and you could make a charitable donation and not have to worry about buying your next meal, this is the way I would approach this problem from a federal point of view.
Okay, Cameron. Just throw it in there. We have wipes. Ecological wipes. Ecological wipes.
Yeah, I hope it's close. So yeah, safe, affordable housing is important for us as well. And I disagree with the notion that just giving people money is going to solve the problem of poverty. I think it's been widely disproven. I think we do need to build safer, stronger communities so people don't fall through those cracks. Part of this actually is about decriminalizing drug use. That's part of our platform as well. It's been proven to work in other jurisdictions where you recognize that drug addiction is a health issue, it's not a crime issue, and it should be treated as such that people can have access to the care that they need. I think we need to build more sustainably, so we reduce the cost of owning a home, and your home does more for you, whether it's producing energy or we don't pay for water here, but if we did, that would be another cost. If we had, it depends on where you live. Okay, right. So why not, right? There's all kinds of water saving measures that we could introduce quite easily, existing technologies. Also growing food at home. I'm part of the urban agriculture movement, and there's a lot that you can grow at home. It used to be a commonplace thing. People here may have known that growing up, that it was just part of your life. And then, that all fell by the wayside as we got used to the grocery store providing everything we need whenever we want. But at Concordia, I was part of an initiative that restored a rooftop greenhouse on top of the hall building. And it's really something special to pick a clementine or a grapefruit off a tree in the middle of winter, right? So these are the kinds of things that we could bring back and introduce, and part of our platform is to reform the building code to bring in, not necessarily that specific of a measure, but to make houses more sustainable in the long run. And then, as far as immigration goes, I think that we can't kind of pit one against the other. We can't say that immigrants are responsible for driving up housing prices or making housing stock less available. But I do think we need to build more sustainably, more affordably, and to protect people's rights to have access to housing and make that a fundamental right.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move to affordable housing. This is a 3-candidate question. The question is, the rise of property values, is making it difficult for first-time buyers, middle-class families, and seniors to afford the housing market. How will you help the West Islanders with this issue? And we'll start the questioning with Francis.
Thank you. Well, housing affordability is on the radar. In the last budget, the 2019 budget, we introduced the first-time home buyers plan, whereby a first-time home buyer will not have to borrow as much. We'll have to borrow 10% less because they'll get an equity investment from CMHC, which they will not have to pay interest on, but that they will have to pay back when they sell their house. So the first-time home buyers plan is part of that strategy. Secondly, we've in the current platform, we've committed to a tax on those who do not live in Canada, but who have say a home in Canada that is empty. So it's basically a tax on speculation. And thirdly, on affordable housing, we announced and we've already started proceeding with a $40 billion national housing strategy. Now, at the moment, we're still in in many cases, that money flows through the provinces. At the moment, the federal government is still negotiating with Quebec on well, not so much the money that's been set aside, but on the modalities of how that's going to work. So as soon as those negotiations are completed, that money will flow, and we've already, with the national housing strategy, built affordable housing, shelters for women, and all of this flows from our platform commitments in 2015. But it's a $40 billion national housing strategy that we're rolling out.
Thank you so much.
There's still 2 more candidates I can speak to this one round. So who would like to go next? Yep, we're gonna go with Dana. By the end of the night, I should get your name right. I should be able to pronounce it right. No.
So I kind of started to talk about that issue, and one way to get these affordable quality housing built fast is we would renounce the GST on units that are built. So condos going up right now, things that are built, the developer, we would say, you don't have to pay GST on because you're building X amount of affordable units. So that's one way we can do it. And another thing is, so we'll alleviate some of the pressure on the housing market just so that people can access affordable rental units. But also, we also agree that we need to make it easier for first-time buyers, and we think we should go back to allowing longer-term mortgages so that people don't have to pay as much on a monthly basis, because we do recognize as well that I think 50% of Canadians are $200 short every month from paying their bills, and we think that people are able to pay less every month on their mortgage. That'll help them get into their homes sooner. I saw time. We also, the same thing that Scarpellegia talked about, we think that we need to address speculation and money laundering that's currently going on and is affecting the housing market. Thank you.
So, what is driving up the price of housing? It's simple economics. It's supply and demand. We're bringing in over 300,000 immigrants. The majority of them are settling in Toronto and Vancouver, and they're driving up the prices. We're starting to see that in the West Island. So part of our platform is to reduce the number of immigrants coming in that will suit the economic needs of Canada. Now, what else makes a house unaffordable? We're approaching Tax Freedom Day of July 1st. That means for the first 6 months of the year, you're paying federal tax, you're paying provincial tax, municipal tax, GST, QST. We're working 6 months out of the year to pay the government. So our plan, at least from a federal point of view, is to reduce taxes. You'll have more money in your pocket, more money to make the mortgage payments. Simple economics, folks.
It's time? It's time. It is a very, very Rhonda Masada West Island blog question, but it was echoed by the MLUWC. So I'm checking, I'm checking my acronym, right? It shows there. Sorry, guys.
You're doing a good job.
All right. Okay, this is a local concern question. All 5 of you will have the chance to answer this question in whichever language you choose. What have you learned during your door-to-door campaigning about the concerns of West Island residents? You have 2 minutes apiece, and we'll start with Gary and go in this order, just to make it a little easier. Because we're fighting for the microphone and all. Gary, you're up.
Well, it won't come as a surprise that the two themes that I'm hearing is the economy and the environment. And I think that right now the environment, a lot of people are confusing climate change with the environment. So our platform, and it's written right in there, that we plan to clean up all our waterways, our rivers, our lakes, our streams. We want to make the air as clean as possible, our soil as clean as possible. And people are happy with that. If we're able to achieve those goals within a 4-year mandate, something that we're spending money and we're seeing concrete results, I think people would rather see that than having to spend billions of dollars forcing us to reduce emissions. And in a global sense, it won't make a drop in the bucket. The economy, you know my feeling about the economy. We want to leave more money in your pocket. Other parties are saying we want to put more money in your pocket. That means the money shouldn't have come out in the first place. We want to leave more money in your pocket.
Dana, you're up. Dana, you're here, babe. Not Donna.
Je vais prendre l'opportunité de répondre en français parce que je ne l'ai pas fait encore, mais en fait, ce que j'entends des citoyens, c'est les choses dont on a parlé ce soir. C'est les gens, Ils me parlent de l'accessibilité au logement et leur inquiétude par rapport à ça dans l'ouest de l'île. Ils me parlent aussi des changements climatiques, mais aussi d'autres personnes qui me parlent de leur scepticisme et de leur même, comment dire, beaucoup de gens qui sont déçus et qui veulent même pas voter. Ça, je trouve décourageant. Beaucoup de personnes qui n'ont plus confiance dans nos politiciens. Ils n'aiment pas le jeu de comment dire, de slime. Ils n'aiment pas le jeu de mettre des individus un contre l'autre à s'attaquer la personne qui se présente. Et, d'autres éléments que j'entends, mais qu'est-ce que... C'est tout. Je suis fatiguée et merci pour l'opportunité encore.
Thank you. I got to tell you, I've been in the shoes of these people, and just giving back to the community in itself and putting yourselves out there and coming out this way is not an easy task. So let's give a round of applause just as a group. That's great. Come on up. You guys are doing great, and I know it's rough. So let's just keep forging forward.
So as I had mentioned, we knocked so far on 9,000 doors, and our question was, what would you like us to address? What are your concerns? And basically, people are worried about making ends meet. Our seniors they feel forgotten. No one cares about them. They worked all their life, and no one is listening to them. No one knows what they are going through. When you have a senior at the door telling you at the end of the month, I have to really think, do I buy the medication or I buy food? That's a big thing.
Thank you.
The other thing is my generation, the sandwich generation, the generation that is forgotten completely, the generation that has their parents to take care of. Their parents are getting older and they have needs, and they have their children that are not babies anymore. I have an 18-year-old and I have a 14-year-old, and they have a lot of demand. My generation is a forgotten generation because all the promises being made from several parties is regarding young parents with young children. But me, my generation, we don't exist on the radar. So that's what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm here to fight for, and that's where I'm planning to make a change. Thank you.
Francis?
A lot of people talk to me about American politics, but that's true from time to time. But generally speaking, I sense that many people are happy with some of the accomplishments of the government, especially negotiating a new trade deal and so on. But the environment comes up, and seniors, yes, they obviously want some policies that address their concerns. And our platform is actually in the last mandate we increased by $1,000 the GIS payment for single seniors, and this time we're going to work with the provinces to increase the survivor benefit of the CPP, QPP by 25%. These are issues that people are interested in, and housing affordability comes up. I think it's a smattering of issues, but definitely the environment is one of the preponderant issues that comes up.
I don't learn anything because I'm actually not running in the West Island. So I'm running in Beaujoy-Soulanges. Yeah, but it's a lot of the same concerns, right? It's people that moved out to the suburbs or the peri-urban area because they wanted a better quality of life. A lot of people that we're meeting are undecided, and they want to know how to reconcile the economy and the environment. That is coming up. I think everyone's saying that. That's coming up right now. How can we have both? I think people are also disappointed about the purchase of the pipeline. A number of people have brought that up and said that's part of the reason why they're not going to vote Liberal this time, or they're reconsidering it. And it is part of our platform that we would basically cancel the sale and not invest any more money into that pipeline and redirect that money into that green economy that we all agree is so important. Well, it's time to put our money where our mouth is. What else? Yeah, seniors' concerns have come up as well, and affordability. Direct impacts of climate change have come up. My writing includes Il Perot, it includes Hudson, it includes Rigaud, places that were quite heavily hit by flooding in 2017 and 2018. So people want to know what the federal government is going to do both to prevent further climate change or try to address further climate change and to support adaptation or resettlement measures. And that's something that I think is really critical right now, is that we really have to focus on what are the scenarios, what might happen. The zone, the flood zone map was redone this past spring, and that's a good step in the right direction, but now we have to actually start to say, okay, not just flooding, but what are the other kinds of things that we might expect, and how do we prepare for them?
All right, so we're all about equal opportunity. And Cameron, you actually answered one extra question. So we're going to allow all the other candidates one more question. This is a Rhonda Massad's signature question. So Rhonda, I'm going to pass you the mic. You're going to ask this amazing question, which personally I love as well. So listen well.
All right, the challenge is on, ladies and gents. I'm going to start in the middle this time. Miriam, you're going to come up and tell us what your last act of kindness was. This, I feel, tells us a little bit about everybody's personal life or professional life.
Okay. Well, as a scout girl, I have to do an act of kindness every day. Yeah. So actually, there's something that happened recently, and I felt, oh my God, if my campaign is all about this, I'm extremely happy. I was in the office that day, and I have this 9-year-old that came to my office with a huge bouquet of flowers. She told her mom that she wanted to come and see me. And she goes, I'm happy that you're running because you look like me. and she was like, you know what? One day I want to become a prime minister. And I was like, oh my God, if I'm inspiring this little girl to get into politics and get involved in her community and serve her country, oh my God, my campaign is a winning campaign already. That's all what I want.
It doesn't matter. It was your last act of kindness. I wish I could hand you the mic. I can't.
30 more seconds. So think about it.
You can borrow your right hand.
Last act of kindness. I'll say the last act of kindness, telling my volunteer not to come, and because he was tired and had so much stuff to do and needed to go to school, and I said, I can handle this. I'll go alone. I mean, that's it. That's my act of kindness.
My last act of kindness was yesterday. My mother is 91 years old. And she uses a walker. So I took her to the grocery store and helped her do some food shopping.
Good for you.
My mother's 90, and I've done some of those shopping trips as well. And I just try just opening the door for somebody, letting somebody in the elevator first, smiling at them. I think those things make a difference sometimes. If you're having a bad day and somebody smiles at you, it can change your perspective. I think all of us meet so many people, and I know all of these candidates are good people and try to help anybody in any way they can, and I'm sure everybody has more than one recent act of kindness, but just I think it's a question of disposition, and yes, helping your elderly mother is I think it ranks up there. So I try to do that too.
Thank you. Jane, I need your help right now. Yes. Because we're moving on to are we moving on where we're at? This is the boss of the show here, and I need to know what our next steps are. This lady needs a round of applause, please. She is the organizer. We are here, and I gotta tell you, this is her baby. This is what she does well, and she has made this very, very easy on me and Danielle. Danielle and I, my mother would kill me.
A couple of questions from the club that have not been addressed yet that I would like to see addressed. One is from Anne Brohan, and what will your party do to address the current piecemeal approach to ending boil water advisories on First Nations reserves?
Is it two candidate or a three candidate question? Let's say two. Gary's up. There we go.
Well, it is in our party platform that we are committed to bringing potable drinking water to every Indigenous community across Canada. There's been a lot of suffering going on, and it's heartbreaking to see that Canadians, Indigenous communities are going through what they're going through. So it is our commitment that we will follow through on this issue.
I'm sure it's a piecemeal approach actually, because when our government came into office, it made a conscious decision to end all long-term boil water advisories on First Nations by 2021. March 2021, we've already taken 87 of these off, and it wasn't piecemeal. It was basically an act of political will, and it involved putting maps. This is what I've heard. I haven't seen it, but I know that the minister took it very seriously, and essentially, it became like I think it was the war room approach. You put a map, and this is where there's a problem, and this is where there's a problem, and we've invested almost $2 billion in First Nations communities for water. And one of the problems that existed before was that there wasn't enough money for repairs. And so the systems were going unrepaired. So more money is going to help, but it's a very complex problem. There's also the problem of retaining water operators, because once a water operator becomes proficient, often they get poached by the provincial or by municipalities off reserve and so on. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to reach that target. I'm convinced we're going to reach that target. And but it hasn't been piecemeal. It's been an act of will and political will backed up by funding.
And we have a question from Nancy Dore. Given that the United States can no longer claim to be a safe country for refugees, and that the Canadian Federation of University Women and many refugee organizations have called for the suspension of the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement, what is your party's position? Perhaps Dana?
We're very clear about that. We would suspend it, and we're not afraid to do it.
Actually, what my party want to do is to bring order, fairness, and compassion to our border. I went personally, and there's a video on my Facebook page, I went to our border at Roxham Road, because I wanted to see how the borders are, how it looks like, and how is it that it's easy to cross the border there. Yes, refugees, it's an important issue, but we need to bring order to our borders.
Order to the border.
Order to the border.
I would like to ask our timekeeper, Nancy Simeon, how much time we have left in question period.
We're theoretically going till 10 to 9. Is that what we had agreed on?
Well, 60 minutes after the presentations, yeah.
Yep. So it's at 10 to 9, so we've got about 7 minutes left.
Okay. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to ask a question? Yes. Jennifer.
So I've been listening tonight with great
Perhaps
interest.
you could.
Jen, I'm going to ask you to.
That's true. We are being live streamed.
We're microphone challenged, Jen. Can you come next to me?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. We're going to give you that here.
So full disclosure for some of the candidates that are not aware, I work for a provincial politician and I have for the last 16 years. So I've represented candidates and I've represented elected officials. And the one observation I have as a result of that work is if you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a welder, or a mechanic, there's a rule book, there are codes of ethics, there are guidelines that dictate how you do the job. When you're a politician, whether it be at the municipal, provincial, or federal level, what you have to deal with is, on average, 45,000 people that you represent sitting at home and saying, I could do that better than that person. So my question to anyone who wishes to answer the question is, what basic training do you think you need to run for office? Whether it be book training or street smarts, and what key skills do you think make you an effective candidate? Thank
Well, to answer the question, we need to identify what's the role of a member of parliament to see if you're qualified, if you're not, if you need more training. So in my eyes, a member of parliament is a public servant. And the role of the member of parliament is to be a servant for the people he represents. He represents the people in Ottawa, not Ottawa in the writing. So the minute the word servant is forgotten, that's when everything goes wrong. So when you get to the job and you know you're here to serve your community, to listen to the people, to find solution to the problems that are in your community, then you're ready for the job. And you have to keep, or I have to keep in front of my eyes always, that the honor of the seat should never eclipse the honor of the service. Thank you.
I think maybe the schooling can never prepare you. I think it's the aptitudes are really the listening skills and advocacy and an open mind to be able to be optimistic about finding solutions, to be able to bridge between many different worldviews, to be able to communicate with colleagues, to be able to defend ideas. But they're really people skills, I think. I think it's a communication and beyond skill, I think it's a love for people and optimism. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, I thought about this sort of, how do we be an effective member of parliament or an effective politician? I think a lot of it is listening and hearing what they need. It's analysis, so understanding how does the government function. It's leadership, and that often means going against the grain, or it can mean going against the grain.
and people might not want to do something, but if you can see that's the direction that we need to go in, then you need to advocate, you need to motivate, you need to get people behind you and help people see why we need to go in that direction, and sometimes you have to push a little bit. Yeah, and I think it seems like an impossible task, right? Like, how can one person represent 100,000 people? That seems impossible, right? But I think we should develop more technological solutions for this. We should develop more ways for people to have their voices heard in their community. More participatory democracy is basically what I'm saying. And I would love to see that more. I would love to see a Government of Canada website or kind of going to the next level with web technology to really make it transparent. Like, this is what's going on. This is where money's going. This is what we're focused on right now. Use infographics, use data, use all those tools that we have right now to communicate and get people engaged back and have that two-way communication going on.
Well, I think everything that's been said about this is true. I think obviously communication is fundamental. Both two-way communication is fundamental. Communication is how you learn and understand what your constituents are thinking and what they would like to see from the government. But to have that kind of communication, you have to be very accessible. You have to be very, very present in the community. Also, you have to be I think you have to be very organized, because you're talking what 108,000 people in this riding, 83,000 voters. Then you're dealing with colleagues, you're dealing with stakeholders, and you really you need to be organized, or you're just going to spin your wheels. And the other thing you need is you have to have great staff. Okay, I'm blessed. I have great staff. And I think you know that, Jennifer. You're a staffer. You have to have good staff, because they are helping you with a lot of the legwork. You give direction. You say do this, do that, but they're doing the legwork, and so good staff is very important. And when you do get to Ottawa, you have to be a bit of a generalist, a lot of a generalist, because all kinds of issues are crossing the House of Commons floor on any given day. But you need to find a couple of niche issues that when you're not, being a generalist and you have time to study and focus, you're going to focus on those two issues, and you have to make sure those issues are jive with what your constituents want, and then you become a bit of an expert in those issues, and you can try and advance them within the caucus and within the House of Commons. So I think what everyone said is correct. It's just an amalgam of all kinds of skills and qualities.
Well, our time is up, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for being such a receptive audience. I would like to thank our 5 candidates for having spent the evening with us. I think we're all a little further ahead in understanding what you stand for and what your party stand for. I would like to thank our timekeeper, Nancy Assinian, who has been working very hard in the back. And I would also like to thank Rhonda and Daniel for your implication this evening. Thank you very much, and I guess we'll talk after the 21st. Good luck.